The warning shot commander Alan Wright stood at the viewport of Earth Defense Station Alpha, his stern gaze fixed on the approaching vessel. It was unmistakably Imperial in design, sleek, predatory, with the characteristic golden emblem of the Galactic Empire emblazoned across its hull. "They're ignoring our hail, sir," reported Communications Officer Diane Foster, her voice tense. Wright nodded, unsurprised. The Empire had grown accustomed to doing as it pleased throughout the galaxy. For centuries, they had treated Earth as little more than a quaint curiosity, a primitive world barely worth noticing except as an occasional source of exotic resources and labor. "Send one final warning," Wright ordered. "Inform them that they are entering restricted space without authorization." Officer Foster transmitted the message. Seconds ticked by with no response. The bridge fell silent as the Imperial cruiser continued its approach, now clearly on a vector toward Earth's atmosphere. "They've activated their landing protocols," announced Sensor Chief Ryan Barnes. "They're planning to make planetfall near the North American quadrant." Wright's jaw tightened. 3 months ago, the World Council had unanimously passed Resolution 72, a declaration asserting Earth's sovereign right to control its own orbital space. The resolution had been transmitted to all known spacefaring civilizations, including the Empire. This was no accidental violation. "Weapons status?" Wright asked. "Particle cannons charged and ready, sir," replied Weapons Officer Maria Davis. Wright took a deep breath. What he was about to do would change humanity's relationship with the galaxy forever. Target their propulsion systems only. Fire a single pulse, lowest effective setting. Officer Davis hesitated for just a fraction of a second before her fingers flew across the control panel. "Firing now, sir." A brilliant blue beam lanced out from the station, striking the Imperial vessel with surgical precision. The effect was immediate. The ship's engines flickered and died, leaving it drifting in high orbit. "Direct hit. Their main drive is offline," reported Barnes. "They're switching to emergency power." Wright nodded. "Now they'll answer our hails." Sure enough, the communication panel lit up with an incoming transmission. When Wright accepted the call, the furious face of an Imperial officer appeared on screen. His skin was the pale blue typical of the Empire's dominant species. His eyes narrowed with rage. "This is Captain Zorthal of the Imperial vessel Dominion. How dare you fire upon a ship of the Empire? Your primitive world will face severe consequences for this act of rebellion." Wright kept his expression neutral. "Captain Zorthal, this is Commander Alan Wright of Earth Defense Force. Your vessel ignored multiple warnings and violated Earth sovereign space as defined in Resolution 172, which was properly filed with the Galactic Registry. We will provide assistance with repairs, but your vessel must remain in designated orbit until diplomatic channels address this incident." The Imperial captain's face darkened to deep indigo, a sign of extreme anger in his species. "You have no authority to restrict Imperial movement. The Empire recognizes no such resolution. Prepare to be boarded and your defense systems dismantled." Wright cut the transmission and turned to his executive officer. "They'll be calling for reinforcements. We have maybe 48 hours before an Imperial response force arrives." "Should we destroy them completely?" asked Davis quietly. Wright shook his head. "No, that's exactly what they'd expect from primitive humans. Instead, dispatch repair crews to assist them, but keep their weapons offline, and alert Defense Secretary Rodriguez immediately." As the bridge crew rushed to carry out his orders, Wright returned his gaze to the disabled Imperial ship. The warning shot had been fired, not just at that vessel, but at the entire concept of Imperial dominance. Earth had declared its independence from the galaxy's bullies, and there was no going back now. Ambassador Greg Miller adjusted his collar as he entered the conference room on Luna Base. The sterile white walls and round table could not hide the tension in the air. Across from him sat Imperial Envoy Kha'Zix, a tall figure with scaled skin that shimmered under the artificial lights. "The Empire considers this an act of war," Kha'Zix stated, his voice cold and emotionless. His 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of agitation among his species. "We consider it an act of self-defense," Miller replied calmly. "The Dominion ignored multiple warnings, It violated our sovereign space. Kha'Zix leaned forward. Sovereign space? Earth has been under Imperial protection for 3 centuries. You exist at our pleasure. Protection implies consent, Miller said. We never asked for it, nor did we agree to surrender our autonomy. The Imperial envoy slammed a 6-fingered hand on the table. The Empire demands immediate reparations. Dismantle your defense systems, hand over the humans responsible. Accept an Imperial garrison in your orbit. Miller did not flinch. Those terms are unacceptable. Then prepare for a blockade. No ships in or out of your system. We will isolate Earth until you understand your place in the galactic order. Behind Miller, his aide passed him a data tablet. The message from Earth was brief. Quantum shield fully operational, stand firm. Miller allowed himself a small smile. A blockade would be unwise, Envoy Kha'Zix. You think your primitive weapons can stand against the Imperial fleet? Your species barely left its own atmosphere a few centuries ago. Perhaps you should review the sensor data from your disabled ship, Miller suggested. The shot that disabled the Dominion was fired at 1/10 power. Our technology has evolved while the Empire was busy looking elsewhere. Kha'Zix's scales rippled with anger. Impossible. Our intelligence reports are outdated, Miller finished for him. When you treated us as a backwater world, we took advantage of your inattention. On the other side of Luna Base, Dr. Nancy Ellis stood before a holographic display of an Imperial engine core. Her team of scientists worked frantically around her. The quantum signature is stable, she announced. We can replicate their faster-than-light technology using Earth materials. Her assistant, John Winters, looked up from his calculations. How long until we can retrofit our fleet? 3 weeks for the first ship. Maybe 2 months for the entire defense force. Winters shook his head in amazement. They never should have left that crashed scout ship in the Arctic. Their overconfidence is our opportunity, Ellis replied. Back in the conference room, Miller activated a projection showing Earth's new defense grid. Thousands of satellites equipped with particle weapons formed a protective web around the planet. We don't want war, Envoy Kha'Zix. We want recognition of our independence, equal standing in galactic affairs. The Empire does not negotiate with lesser species, Kha'Zix hissed. Then perhaps it's time for the Empire to evolve, Miller said. Because the alternative will be costly for everyone. Kha'Zix stood abruptly. You have 3 Earth days to reconsider your position. After that, the full might of the Empire will descend upon your world. As the envoy stormed out, Miller received another message. Defense fleet mobilized. Quantum shield expanded to cover Mars colonies. First contact initiative activated. Miller felt the weight of history on his shoulders. For centuries, humanity had been treated as an afterthought in galactic politics. Now they were about to announce themselves properly to the stars. Outside the viewport, Earth hung like a blue jewel against the blackness of space. For the first time since humans discovered they weren't alone in the universe, their planet's future was truly in their own hands. General Frank Cooper walked through the massive underground factory that had, until 2 weeks ago, produced civilian airships. Now the assembly lines churned out fighter craft and defensive drones. Workers moved with purpose, their faces showing determination rather than fear. Production is up 40% since last week, reported his aide, Major Samantha Reed. Every continent has converted at least half their industrial capacity to defense needs. Cooper nodded, watching as robotic arms installed weapon systems on a sleek interceptor. How are the volunteers coming along? Better than expected. Training. Centers are operating at triple capacity. People are standing in line for hours to enlist. The general wasn't surprised. When the World Council had broadcast footage of the Imperial envoy's threats, public opinion had solidified overnight. Centuries of being treated as backward children by the Empire had created a simmering resentment in Earth's collective consciousness. And, the space elevator? Cooper asked. Operating at maximum capacity. We're moving personnel and materials to the orbital platforms around the clock. They reached a secured area where engineers huddled around holographic displays. Engineer Olivia Martinez looked up as they approached. Dark circles under her eyes suggested she hadn't slept in days. General Cooper, she greeted him. I think we've found something. She gestured to the rotating image of an Imperial warship. We've been studying the debris from previous encounters, particularly the scout ship that crashed in the Arctic 20 years ago. There's a vulnerability in their shield design. Cooper leaned closer. Show me. Their shields are strongest at the front and sides, where they expect attacks. But here, she pointed to a section near the engine housing, there's a resonance frequency issue. Their shield harmonics are weakest when their engines are at full power. Can we exploit that? Martinez nodded. We've modified our weapon systems to target precisely that frequency. In theory, we could disable their largest ships with a fraction of the energy typically required. For the first time in days, Cooper felt a glimmer of hope. Get this information to all defense platforms immediately. In deep space beyond Neptune's orbit, Captain Eric Johnson guided the Starship Defiance on a silent approach to an Imperial monitoring outpost. The ship's experimental stealth systems kept them invisible to standard scanners. Passive sensors only, Johnson ordered. Record everything but emit nothing. His bridge crew worked in near silence, gathering intelligence on Imperial fleet movements. The data they collected showed an alarming buildup. Over 40 Imperial warships had already entered the outer solar system, with more arriving hourly. They're positioning for a full orbital blockade, observed Navigation Officer Pete Wilson. Classic encirclement pattern. Johnson studied the tactical display. They're still following standard Imperial doctrine. They haven't adapted to our new capabilities. Overconfidence? Asked Wilson. They've conquered 1,000 worlds using the same tactics. Why change what's worked for millennia? The Defiance drifted silently, recording fleet communications and movement patterns. When they had enough data, Johnson ordered a stealth withdrawal. Their mission complete, they would return to Earth with valuable intelligence on Imperial battle plans. Back on Earth, citizens prepared for possible attack. Unlike the panic that might have ensued generations earlier, people organized civil defense units, stockpiled supplies, and continued their daily lives with quiet resolve. In schools, children learned emergency procedures. In hospitals, medical staff trained for potential casualties. In laboratories, scientists worked around the clock to improve defensive technologies. The news channels showed little fear, instead focusing on humanity's preparations and readiness. The message was clear: Earth would not surrender its newly claimed independence without a fight. As the 3-day deadline approached, Earth transformed itself from a planet that had long accepted its place as a galactic backwater into a world united in defense of its sovereignty. Whether this transformation had come in time remained to be seen. Diplomatic Officer Susan Wallace adjusted her breathing mask as she entered the dimly lit chamber. The abandoned mining facility on Europa, Jupiter's ice-covered moon, had become the perfect meeting spot, far from Imperial sensors and prying eyes. 3 alien figures waited for her. Each one represented a species that had suffered under Imperial rule. Wallace recognized them from briefings: an Arxian with its crystalline exoskeleton, a Pulveran floating in a containment field that mimicked its methane-rich home atmosphere, and a Zentari, whose forearms moved in constant fluid motions. You came alone. Brave, said the Arxian, its voice creating musical tones as it passed through its crystal body. I am Vexillar, voice of the Arxian remnant. Wallace nodded respectfully. Earth understands the risks you're taking by meeting with us. We appreciate your courage. The Pulveran pulsed with blue light as it spoke, its translator converting the light patterns to speech. We have watched your species for decades. Until now you seemed content with Imperial oversight. Not content, Wallace corrected. Preparing, building our strength while they underestimated us. The Zentari moved closer, its 4 eyes blinking in sequence. I am Kirna, Resistance Coordinator. My people have fought the Empire for 3 generations. We have paid in blood for each small victory. The Empire calls your actions rebellion, said Vexillar. They have dispatched their 7th Fleet to pacify Earth. Wallace wasn't surprised. Earth's intelligence had predicted as much. How many? Ships? 200 warships, replied Kirna. They will arrive within 6 of your Earth days. The Pulverin's containment field hummed as it moved forward. I am Mist Speaker. My people were once billions strong across 12 worlds. Now we exist on 3 hidden colonies, fewer than 1 million of us left. Wallace felt a chill that had nothing to do with Europa's frozen environment. What happened? We refused to provide our atmospheric technology to the Empire's terraforming projects, Mist Speaker replied. They made an example of us. Silence filled the chamber. The gravity of Earth's situation became painfully clear to Wallace. This wasn't just about independence, it could be about survival. Why have you sought this meeting? Asked Vexlar. Wallace activated a holographic projector. Images of Earth's defense systems appeared along with data on their new technologies. We believe that united, we stand a better chance than fighting separately. Earth offers an alliance. The alien studied the projections with various expressions of surprise and skepticism. Impressive, admitted Kirna. But the Empire has crushed greater forces. Not forces with our quantum shield technology, Wallace countered, or our resonance. Weapons that can target their shield harmonics, Miss Speaker pulsed rapidly, their equivalent of excitement. You've developed harmonic targeting? We thought such technology was beyond your capabilities. The Empire thought so too. That was their mistake. Vexillar's crystalline form shimmered with changing colors. The Arxian remnant has ships, fast, stealthy vessels that could assist Earth, but our council will need proof of your resolve. The Pulverins can offer atmospheric manipulation technology, added Miss Speaker. We could disrupt their targeting systems in battle. Kirna's forearms moved in complex patterns. The Zentari resistance has a network of spies throughout Imperial space. We can provide intelligence on fleet movements and vulnerabilities. Wallace felt a surge of hope. Together we could form a coalition, not just to defend Earth, but to challenge Imperial dominance throughout this sector. The aliens exchanged glances, a universal gesture of consideration that transcended biological differences. There is much to discuss, said Vexlar finally. Terms of alliance, coordination of forces, plans for after the conflict should we survive. Wallace nodded. Earth is prepared to host representatives from all your peoples. In secret, of course. A first contact coalition, mused Kirna. It has never been attempted on this scale before. As the meeting continued deep beneath Europa's ice, Wallace realized they were making history. Centuries of imperial divide and conquer. Tactics were being undone in a single conversation. Whether this fragile alliance would be enough against the approaching Imperial fleet remained to be seen, but for the first time, Earth wasn't facing the threat alone. Admiral Drenthul stood on the command deck of the Imperial flagship Inevitable Conquest, his forearms clasped behind his back in the traditional posture of Imperial authority. His scaled skin had darkened to deep purple, a sign of his focused battle readiness. The viewing screen before him showed the blue-green planet that had dared to challenge the might of the Galactic Empire. 200 warships arranged in standard conquest formation, reported his first officer. The humans have been monitoring our approach but have made no moves to intercept. Drenthul's mouth tentacles twitched in amusement. Of course not. They must now realize the foolishness of their defiance. Prepare the declaration of subjugation. Deep in Earth's military command center, Chief Strategist Paul Bennett watched the Imperial fleet's approach on a holographic display. Beside him, Defense Secretary Rodriguez and Commander Wright studied the enemy formation. Classic Imperial hammer and anvil approach, Bennett observed. They've used the same tactics for the last 5 centuries against dozens of species. Rodriguez frowned. Why change what works? Because this time it won't work, said Bennett, adjusting the display to show Earth's defensive plan. They expect us to group our forces for a decisive battle. Instead, we'll use our smaller, faster ships to harass their formation from multiple vectors. Commander Wright nodded in approval. Space guerrilla warfare. On the display, hundreds of Small dots representing Earth's defense vessels moved into position, hiding behind moons, asteroids, and in planetary orbital shadows. "Launch Operation Mosquito," ordered Rodriguez. Throughout the solar system, Earth's ships powered up and moved into attack position. Unlike the massive Imperial warships, Earth's vessels were designed for speed and maneuverability. Each carried the newly developed resonance weapons specifically calibrated to Imperial shield frequencies. Aboard the starship Intrepid, Lieutenant Kate Wilson led her special operations team through final equipment checks. Their mission was perhaps the most dangerous of all: infiltrate the Imperial flagship and extract vital intelligence. "Stealth systems at full capacity," reported her second-in-command, Sergeant Joe Martinez. "The shuttle is ready." Wilson looked at her team, 6 of Earth's best operatives, each skilled in zero-gravity combat and alien technology interfaces. "Remember, we're not there to engage unless absolutely necessary. Get in, download their battle plans and fleet communications, protocols, and get out." As the Imperial fleet crossed Mars's orbit, Admiral Drenthul prepared to broadcast his demands for Earth's surrender. Before he could, alarms blared across his ship. "Multiple small craft approaching from all vectors," shouted his sensor officer. "They're using some kind of stealth technology. We didn't detect them until they were almost in weapons range." Drenthul's tentacles flared in anger. "Impossible. Primitive humans don't have such technology. Rays, shields, and prepare point defense systems." But the Earth vessels were already firing. Instead of the expected energy blasts against Imperial ship hulls, they targeted precise points where engine outputs connected with shield generators. On dozens of Imperial ships, shields flickered and failed in specific sections. "What is happening?" demanded Drenthul as his flagship shuddered from a direct hit. "How are they penetrating our defenses?" His technology officer worked frantically at her console. "They're exploiting resonance frequencies in our shield harmonics. It's as if they know exactly where to hit us." On Earth, Bennett watched the battle unfold with grim satisfaction. Phase 1 successful. Their formation is breaking apart as they try to target our ships. Meanwhile, taking advantage of the chaos, Lieutenant Wilson's stealth shuttle slipped through a temporarily disabled section of the flagship's shields. They docked at an emergency airlock, cut through the metal with silent laser tools, and entered the massive vessel. "We're in," Wilson whispered into her communicator. "Beginning infiltration of command decks." As Earth's defense forces continued their hit-and-run attacks, Admiral Drenthul faced a situation no Imperial commander had encountered in centuries: an inferior species that refused to be conquered, using tactics that confounded Imperial military doctrine. "Regroup the fleet," he ordered. "Concentrate firepower on their largest defense platforms. Show these humans the true meaning of Imperial might." But even as he gave the command, Drenthul felt something unfamiliar creeping into his mind. Doubt. The Imperial warships pushed forward, breaking through Earth's outer defense perimeter. Emerald beams of energy tore through space as they targeted Earth's orbital platforms. It was the largest space battle in human history, with hundreds of vessels engaged across the orbit of Mars. Commander Wright watched from the battlecruiser Dauntless as 3 Earth defense ships exploded under concentrated Imperial fire. "They're adapting to our hit-and-run tactics," he said grimly. "Have all units switch to pattern Delta. Keep them guessing." Earth's forces responded immediately, changing their attack formations. Smaller ships darted between the massive Imperial vessels, firing precisely at vulnerable points before speeding away. The battle had been raging for 6 hours, with losses mounting on both sides. "Imperial forces have broken through Sector 7, reported Communications Officer Foster. "They're heading toward Mars colonies." Wright's face hardened. "Alert, Administrator. Morris on Mars base. Tell him to activate emergency protocols." On the red planet's surface, Mars Colony Administrator Jack Morris received the warning with growing dread. 2,000 civilians lived under his protection in the biodomes of Olympus City. The approaching Imperial ships would be in range to attack in minutes. "Begin evacuation to the underground shelters," he ordered his staff, "and prepare the gravimetric disruptors." His second-in-command looked alarmed. "Sir, those are still experimental. Dr. Ellis warned that they're unstable." "We're out of options, Carl," Morris replied. Either we use them or we watch Olympus City burn. In a heavily shielded laboratory beneath the Martian surface, technicians activated 5 disc-shaped devices. Each one began to hum with increasing intensity, distorting the very fabric of space-time around them. Above Mars, the leading edge of the Imperial fleet moved into bombardment position. Admiral Drenthul watched with satisfaction as his ships prepared to make an example of the human colony. "Begin planetary bombardment," he ordered. "Target their life support systems first." Before his gunners could comply, space itself seemed to ripple around their ships. Warning alarms blared across the Imperial fleet as navigation systems failed, and engines strained against sudden, impossible gravitational forces. "What is happening?" Drenthul demanded as his flagship began to spin out of control. On Mars, Morris watched the sensor readings with a mixture of hope and horror. The gravimetric disruptors were working far better than anyone had predicted, creating localized distortions in gravity that played havoc with the Imperial ship's systems. "The disruptors are exceeding safe operating parameters," warned his science officer. "They could tear apart the colony's foundation if we keep them running much longer." "Just give our forces time to regroup," Morris said. "That's all we need." In the chaos above Mars, Imperial ships collided with one another, their carefully maintained formation dissolving into disarray. Earth defense vessels seized the opportunity, concentrating fire on the now vulnerable Imperial engines and weapon systems. Commander Wright ordered an all-out assault on the disoriented Imperial center. "This is our chance. All ships converge on the flagship. Disable their command capabilities." As the battle raged, sensors detected new ships entering the system. For a moment, Wright feared Imperial reinforcements had arrived. Then the communications officer turned to him with a look of disbelief. "Sir, we're receiving transmissions from the incoming vessels. They're not Imperial. It's the Arxians, Pulverans, and Zentari. They're hailing us as allies." The view screen showed an astonishing sight. Vessels of clearly alien design moving to engage the Imperial fleet's rear positions. The first contact. Coalition had arrived. On the Arxian command ship Crystal Vengeance, Fleet Commander Vexlar directed his forces with cold precision. "Target their communications arrays. Cut them off from each other." Pulveran ships released clouds of specialized particles that confounded Imperial targeting systems, while Zentari strike craft darted between enemy vessels with impossible agility, landing devastating blows against vulnerable points. Admiral Drenthul watched in disbelief as his fleet was caught between Earth's forces and the alien coalition. "Impossible. These species have been enemies for generations. How could they coordinate an attack?" As Imperial ships began to retreat or surrender, Earth forces linked up with their new allies. For the first time in centuries, the Empire had faced not just resistance but defeat. In Mars orbit, humans and aliens fought side by side, writing a new chapter in galactic history with each passing moment. The Imperial fleet scattered across the solar system, their formations broken, their command structure in disarray. Earth ships pursued retreating Imperial vessels, while the allied Arxian, Pulveran, and Zentari forces secured captured enemy ships. Dr. Nancy Ellis stood in her laboratory aboard the defense station Horizon, surrounded by holographic displays showing the current state of the battle. Her team had accomplished what many thought impossible. They had successfully adapted Imperial technology to jam their faster-than-light communications. "Quantum interference field at maximum strength," reported her assistant John Winters. "The Imperial ships can't send distress signals beyond our solar system." Ellis nodded with satisfaction. "Admiral Drenthul is completely isolated. No reinforcements, no retreat, no options." The damaged Imperial flagship Inevitable Conquest drifted in high Earth orbit, surrounded by Earth and allied vessels. Its once proud hull now bore the scars of direct hits, and many of its weapon systems were offline. Inside the massive ship, Lieutenant Kate Wilson and her infiltration team had completed their primary mission, downloading the Empire's battle plans and communication protocols. Now they faced a decision. "We have what we came for," said Sergeant Martinez. "We should extract now while they're still in confusion." Wilson studied the ship schematics they had stolen. "There's something else." These plans show the location of the main communications hub. If we can access it, we could broadcast directly to every Imperial ship in the system. That's deep in Imperial territory, Martinez warned. Heavy resistance guaranteed. Wilson's expression hardened. It's worth the risk. This could end the battle entirely. Meanwhile, Captain Eric Johnson and the Starship Defiance led a daring assault on the Imperial flagship's outer defenses. Their mission was twofold: create a diversion for Wilson's team and capture Admiral Drenthul himself. Multiple Imperial guards at the command deck entrance, reported Johnson's tactical officer. They've established defensive positions. Johnson studied the tactical display. Deploy sonic disruptors. Their species has sensitive auditory organs. It will disorient them without causing permanent harm. As Johnson's forces engaged the Imperial defenders, Wilson's team reached the vast communications center at the heart of the flagship. Imperial technicians surrendered quickly when faced with Earth Special Forces. Patch me into Ambassador Miller, Wilson ordered as her team secured the room. Miles away in the diplomatic center on Luna Base, Ambassador Greg Miller received Wilson's transmission with surprise. Lieutenant, your team was supposed to extract with the intelligence, not seize their communications hub. Sir, we have an opportunity to end this now, Wilson replied. We've accessed their galactic broadcast system. We can transmit to the entire Empire. Miller's eyes widened as he understood. The evidence, can you broadcast it empire-wide? Yes, sir. We have control of their authentication codes. They won't be able to block it. For decades, Earth intelligence had collected evidence of Imperial atrocities against countless species. Massacres of civilian populations, destruction of cultural heritage, illegal biological weapons. The Empire had kept these crimes hidden from their own citizens through strict information control. Do it, Miller ordered. Broadcast everything. Throughout Imperial space on thousands of worlds and stations, normal communication suddenly interrupted. Instead, citizens saw documented evidence of their government's crimes: the ruthless suppression of the Pulverons, the enslavement of Zentari populations, the ecological destruction of Arxian crystal forests. Back in Earth orbit, Admiral Drenthul watched in horror as his own officers viewed the transmissions. He saw doubt, then disgust, then anger spread across alien faces. Shut it down, he screamed. This is rebel propaganda. But his technicians could not stop the broadcast. Wilson's team had locked them out of their own systems. On a dozen Imperial ships, crews began to mutiny. Officers who had served faithfully for years now questioned their loyalty to an empire built on such brutality. As reports of surrendering Imperial vessels poured in, Dr. Ellis contacted Earth Command with unexpected news. We've decrypted their FTL communications network completely, she announced, and we're receiving signals from at least 30 worlds in Imperial space. They're rising up against Imperial control. The counteroffensive that began as Earth's desperate stand for independence had ignited something much larger, a galactic revolution that would forever change the power structure of known space. The Great Dome of the United Nations headquarters in Geneva had been expanded to accommodate delegates from 27 non-human species. 6 months after the Battle of Sol, Earth hosted the founding conference for what would become known as the Galactic Confederation. Fleet Admiral Alan Wright, newly promoted after his leadership during the conflict, stood at the entrance greeting arriving representatives. He had aged visibly in the past months, silver now prominent in his once dark hair, but his eyes reflected pride as he watched former enemies enter as allies. The Procyon delegation has arrived, announced his aide. Their ships are requesting landing clearance, Wright nodded. Granted immediately, and make sure their environmental needs are accommodated in the conference hall. Inside the dome, Ambassador Greg Miller worked with representatives from the Arxians, Pulverons, and Zentari, the original members of the First Contact Coalition, to finalize the Confederation Charter. The principle of sovereignty must be absolute, insisted Kirna of the Zentari. No member world can be compelled to accept foreign ships or troops without explicit consent. Agreed, said Miller. That was how Imperial dominance began, with protective garrisons that became permanent occupations. Vexlar's crystalline body glimmered as he spoke. The Arxian remnant proposes that all signatories share defensive technologies. No single world should stand vulnerable. The discussions continued for hours with each point carefully debated. This was not to be an Earth-dominated alliance, but a true confederation of equals. Dr. Nancy Ellis led a tour through Earth's new Technological Exchange Center, where scientists from a dozen worlds shared discoveries and innovations. The fall of Imperial information controls had unleashed a renaissance of collaborative research. Our quantum shield technology complements Arxian crystal focusing methods perfectly, she explained to visiting researchers. Together they create a defense system 10 times more efficient than either alone. In orbit, Captain Eric Johnson supervised the installation of warning beacons at the edge of the Sol system. Each beacon was programmed to broadcast a simple message in all known languages. Earth's declaration, no galactic empire ships allowed. Though seemingly provocative, the beacons served a practical purpose. The remnants of the empire still controlled significant territory, and their leadership had vowed revenge for what they termed the Human Rebellion. Final beacon activated, reported Johnson's first officer. The perimeter is complete. Johnson nodded with satisfaction. Begin regular patrol rotations. I want everything within sensor range monitored continuously. Back on Earth in the small town of Millfield, Ohio, life had mostly returned to normal. Children played in parks under blue skies, though occasionally they would point excitedly when an alien visitor passed by. The presence of non-humans on Earth had quickly shifted from extraordinary to simply another aspect of daily life. In a classroom, a teacher pointed to a new map of known space with Earth prominently marked at the center of the expanding Confederation. Before the declaration, many species didn't even know where Earth was, she explained to her students. Now we're helping write the future of the galaxy. As evening fell in Geneva, Fleet Admiral Wright stood alone on a balcony overlooking the conference hall. Defense Secretary Rodriguez joined him, offering a cup of coffee. 35 species have signed the charter, she said, including 3 former Imperial core worlds. The Empire is collapsing from within. Wright took a sip before responding. They'll try to strike back. This isn't over. No, agreed Rodriguez, but the balance has shifted. For the first time in millennia, the galaxy isn't dominated by a single power. Below them, the hall buzzed, with conversation as beings from across the stars found common ground. Translators worked continuously as new alliances formed, and ancient rivalries began to heal. Did you ever imagine this? Asked Rodriguez. When you fired that warning shot at an Imperial vessel? Wright shook his head. I was just protecting Earth. I never thought we'd end up remaking the Galactic Order. As stars appeared in the darkening sky, the delegates prepared to formally sign the Confederation Charter. Earth, once considered a backwater planet barely worth the Empire's notice, had become the birthplace of a new era in galactic history. The warning shot had indeed been heard across the stars, not just as a declaration of independence, but as an invitation to all oppressed species to imagine a different future, one built on mutual respect rather than domination.